Okay, everything up and running, Joe? Cool. Okay. Okay, cool. Just let everything kick in then before we start off. So, for everybody who has joined in already, welcome to TechnoClub. Welcome back to the TechnoClub. I'm just going to give everybody the usual few minutes to get back from school, get logged on, get settled in before we start. We'll start around 10 past. Hello, hello, how are you? You okay? Good, good, good. I was just saying we'll do the usual wait until around 10 past-ish before we make a proper start. How are you? Good? That's good, that's good. So we've got a couple of bits and pieces that we're going to be going through today. Mainly to do with CSS today. So little bit of HTML, but mainly we're going to be doing some CSS today. So that's today's plan, but we'll spend a little bit of time just waiting for everybody to get settled after coming home from school and stuff. Have you had a good day in school today? Yeah? What was that, sorry? That's good. That's good. Hello, Trace. I can see you've joined. Welcome. I was just saying today we're going to be doing a little bit of a little tiny bit of HTML, but we're mainly going to be doing some CSS today. So you all have the joy of looking at my horrible website again from last week. Thanks. It's not going to get much better this week, I'm afraid. Hello. Hi, Martin. Yeah, so we'll start around 10 past. There's actually, so once everybody's had a chance to join, I've actually got a couple of announcements that I need to make before we start today. So lots of exciting, well, it's a mixture of exciting stuff, really good news, and a little bit of sad news. So there's a lot of different bits of news that's coming. Well, yeah, it's nothing. It's nothing too. Well, it is very sad actually. It's very sad news, but I'll tell you once everybody's had a chance to join. But it's nothing too bad. Don't worry. So you'll find out in a second. I'll just let everybody have a chance to get settled, and then we'll go through everything because there's quite a few different announcements. So that we're going to make. So I want to make sure I can get everybody hears them. How's everybody's week been so far? Busy? Tiring? No? Any lots of homework or not so much? Enough. Okay, that'll be good. What's everybody? Yeah. That you were going through your VR head. You just had a new VR headset. You're borrowing one. Okay. Have you got any games for it? Okay. are you going to get the new PlayStation 5, or are you sticking with the PlayStation 4 for now? Okay. Yeah, PlayStation 4 is what I've got as well, but I mainly, at the moment, I'm mainly uh, gaming on my PC more than I am anywhere else. Oh, okay. More of an expert, so I. Ah, okay. Mhm. Right. Mhm. So do you like PC gaming more than Xbox? Yeah. Mhm. Right. Okay. Yeah. Okay. I haven't heard of that one. Mhm. Okay. Yeah. I'll take a look after the stream. Ah, I see that Martin's put Minecraft is better on PC. I would. Um, I mean, I haven't played Minecraft elsewhere, but I'd imagine that I would agree with you on that point if I was ever, if I ever did play it on console. Is that Hypixel, Chris? I haven't played that one either. What's that? What's that about? Ah, okay, I see. One of the best ones there, Chris says. Okay, cool. Right, so we're coming up to 10 past, so we'll make a start. So, as I was saying, for those of you who've just joined, welcome back to this week's Wednesday Techno Club. As the YouTube video's title suggests, this week we're looking at more CSS, mainly focusing on CSS with a little bit of HTML elements that we can add just to help us style our websites a little bit. So I'll go through the different announcements that I needed to make at the start of this stream. So the first bit of news is, which is the sad news, is that Andrew has finished with TechnoCamps. Today was his last day. So Andrew has finished with us. He is working on his PGCE at university. So he's training to be a teacher, which is fantastic. And also he's just had a baby as well, so he's just become a dad, which is fantastic news. So congratulations, Andrew, and thank you for all of your help over the last few months. So that was the mixture of good news and sad news. The other news is actually related to this Techno Club. So there's going to be, in the next few weeks, there's going to be a few changes being made to the way that we run the sessions. So ultimately, what's going to be happening is there's going to be a bit of division in terms of where we're going to be, how we're going to be running things. So the clubs are going to be split. So as you know, a lot of you already know Jack from TechnoCamps. What we're going to be essentially doing is we're going to be having different groups of learners like you, um, and you're all going to be working. So Jack, Jack with a K. So essentially, what's going to happen is there's going to be different groups, and every group is going to be running on a slightly different day. So the techno clubs are going to continue. So like we have in this environment now, where we're working on something, we're building a project. And there's going to be one session that's hosted by Jack, there's going to be one session that's hosted by me, and then there's also going to be a session that's hosted by Cardiff University as well. So there's going to be 3 different Techno Club sessions that you can join. We will release this information to you sort of in more detail once we've worked things out, so don't worry if you're not sure yet. And the other thing that's happening is we're actually introducing something new. So as well as having techno clubs, where you're working on something over a period of 6 weeks, like we've been doing with this website, like we did with Game Fruit, and like we did with Minecraft, what we're going to be having is something called Techno Live. And Techno Live is going to be weekly sessions. So again, there's going to be one held by me and one held by Jack, and we're essentially going to be doing different topics every week. So if you can't, say for example, you decide that you don't really feel like you want to work on a big project, and you just want to kind of attend one-off sessions on different things, then you can come to the Techno Live sessions. But if you decide that you want to work on something quite big, like we've been doing, building a website or building a game through that sort of thing, then you can attend the Techno Club, and you can also attend both if you want to as well. You don't have to do one or the other, you can come to both. It's purely on what you want to do and what sort of time and how much time you want to spend on it. So what's going to happen is there's going to be different days, as I said, for each one of the sessions. Now these could be subject to change, but currently what's going to happen is there's going to be a session run on Mondays by Jack, a session run on Wednesdays by Cardiff, and then this Techno Club session, the one that you've got with me, will be moving to Fridays. And then the Techno Live sessions are only going to be an hour long, so they're going to be on Tuesdays with me and Thursdays with Jack. So they're between 4:30 and 5:30, and the Techno Clubs are going to be between 4:30 and 6:30. So again, I will release eventually we will release all this information to you a bit more formally, so that you can actually see it and you can pick what days you want to do. And yeah, we can do that. It's no problem. We'll get something put together for you once the details have been fully finalised, and then that way, then you you can work it around your availability, then, so to speak, and that sort of thing. And then we'll also kind of work out what because we'll be doing different topics possibly, or maybe it might be that Jack does things maybe that's slightly more advanced, and I do things that are slightly more, let's say beginner level. So it might be that you would rather be with Jack because Jack will be looking at more advanced things, that sort of thing. So we'll work it all out for you. We'll get something put together so that you can choose. But that's the current plan for the Techno Clubs and the new Techno Live session. I know there's a lot of information there, so we will get something formally put together for you in due course once the details have been finalised. So I hope that all makes sense for now. I know there's a lot of news there, lots of big changes, so but bear with us. We are working on new things, new and exciting things for you all to kind of be a part of. So, but what I will say at this stage is, to all of you who are currently watching and have been with us since we started these virtual Techno Clubs, thank you very, very much for being a part of it. We wouldn't have been able to have done what we're, developed it and grown Techno Clubs without your sort of participation. So we're really grateful that you've continued to come in every week and worked on projects together. It's been fantastic. So the reason that because of your support, we've been able to now develop our Techno Club and Techno Live sessions into something much bigger. So thank you for helping us out. So what we're going to do today, as I mentioned, is we're actually now going to be looking at CSS and a bit more HTML and that sort of thing. So like we've been doing in the previous weeks, we're going to be starting off with a little bit of a recap on what we looked at last week. Joe's just put in the chat, some of you might end up getting Andrew as a teacher, because Andrew is actually training to be an ICT teacher. So some of you might end up having Andrew as a teacher, which would be pretty cool. So as I said, we're going to be doing a little bit of a recap. We're going to then kind of move on to looking at a few design features that we can bring in with CSS, and we're going to look at the element inspector, different units of measurement, all that sort of thing. So we'll start off with our usual recap. So can anybody tell me what a nav bar is used for? So either in voice or in the chat. What's a nav bar? Yeah, that's pretty good. Does anybody have anything they want to add to that? No? Okay, yeah, so that was absolutely right. So it is used to make navigation easier. It's used to provide links to other parts of the website. So it might be a case of you'd have, as we have been using the Visit Wales website as an example, they have and you'll see this across most websites, there's a consistent nav bar styling across every single one of the pages, so that you're able to have a clear and easy way of navigating your way around the website. So yeah, that's absolutely right. So can anybody give an example of something that surrounds an element in HTML? So there's a hint there. You can look at the element inspector. So for those of you, tags is something that would be the element, so to speak. But in terms of when we're thinking about specific elements on the page, so say now we've got a paragraph and we've got there's something that surrounds the actual elements that we can adjust the size of, and we can view that with the element inspector. Fierce, I'm not streaming on Discord, sorry, let me fix that. Bear with me. Let me fix that for you. 1 second. There you go. Hopefully you can see that now on Discord. So hopefully that's come up now as well. The answer that I was looking for this question is margins, borders, and padding. So a lot of you might remember we've got the element in the middle. Yeah, that's good. So you've got the element in the middle, and then around that then you've got some padding, you've got the border, and you've got the margin, and all of those things can be adjusted in size using CSS, and we'll have a look at the different units of measurement that we can use in a second. So the last question we've got is, what are RGB and hex codes? I'm sure a lot of you know the answer to this one already because we looked at these last week. There's also RGBA as well. But what are they? So what are they, and what can we use them for? Anybody know? Yeah, that's it. Yeah, spot on. Yeah, absolutely. So Martin's had it as well there. It's colours. So RGB and hex codes, they're used to provide more detail on the colour you'd like something to be. So, instead of having just red or green, you can choose specific shades of red or specific shades of green. And as well as that, there's also, of course, RGBA, which allows you to provide some opacity, okay, to different things on the web page. So yeah, so well done everybody. So that's the recap for this week. I'll just remind you all at this point, I know some of you might not have been doing this, but that's okay, that we also, if you want to update your or review even your project files, some of you, I'm not sure if all of you have been doing the project files. You don't have to if you don't want to. But they're there so that you can remind yourselves on what you want to include in your website, or if you think of something that you want to add to your website, you can do that by looking at the project file. Again, you didn't have to do that if you didn't want to, but the choice is there if you did. So before we move on to looking at the website, I am just going to quickly touch upon units of measurement. So there are a lot. This list is actually very, very short by comparison to the actual list of units, but these are sort of the main units of measurement that you would see when you're working with CSS. Okay, so some of you might recognize some of these from previous sessions or different things. So can anybody tell me where they might have seen points or PT before? No? Okay. Anybody else want to have a guess as to where you might have seen PT used, or points? Yeah, that's right, exactly. So when you're using something like Word or Notepad or anything like that, font sizes are measured using PT, and you can also use that unit of measurement on your websites as well. So that's a good example. Pixels is the main unit of measurement that you'll be using. Yeah, exactly. So yeah, yeah, exactly that. So pixels are, of course, to do with your screen and the size of your screen and all that sort of thing. So you use pixels as a unit of measurement to help you to make things bigger, make text boxes smaller, make images bigger and smaller, etc. And it's based off of the pixel unit of measurement. We've also got percentages on there, which I'm sure we all know what percentages are. You can use those to scale images up or down, or you can, there are different things. You can size things in different ways using percentages. And then there's also, I put there, relative to the parent size, or EM for short. This will probably become clearer using a demonstration, so we will go through it in a second. But the idea behind an EM is that for an example, when you write up your website, okay, back when we did this in week 1, what we had was a document that essentially looked like a text document, and it was just like a Word document, and it came with a generic size. So H1s have a default size, H2s have a default size, paragraphs have a default size. If you were to set those to being 2 EM, what that would mean is that you would have something that's twice the size of the parent size. So whatever that base font size is, so like I said, paragraphs have got a set size. If you were to change that paragraph to being 2 EMs, it would mean that it would be twice the size of the original size of the font. Okay, so that's the idea behind an EM, but we'll go through that in more detail when we're doing like a demonstration. Okay, and then finally, just to quickly recap on margins, borders, and padding. Okay, before we move on to looking at the website. So we've been through this, of course, earlier on. We've got margins, borders, and padding. Every element within a HTML document contains its own margins, borders, and padding, and these are all things that we can adjust using pixels. Okay, so we can use that pixel size to, or even if you want to, I mean, pixels are the more recommended way of going about it, but you could use other units of measurement as well, but preferably stick to using pixels when you're adjusting the sizes of margins, borders, and padding. And we'll be looking at how these margins, borders, and padding all change in terms of width and things like that when you are adjusting their pixel sizes, and what that can do to help you restructure your website a little bit. Okay, so that's the end of the PowerPoint and sort of like the main bulk of the theory that we're going to be doing today. What we're going to be moving on to now is actually looking at, if I'll just get it opened up on here, so screen may go temporarily blank while we're changing windows. So we've gone back to CodePen. So we're back on CodePen on my lovely website with Thrace's favourite colour blue as the background. And I will zoom in for you all again, as I have been, so that we can actually view the text a bit better, the code a bit better. So we're going to be doing lots of different things on the website today. Obviously, I know that all of your websites will look a lot better than mine by the end of this, but what I'll be doing on mine is simply applying the concepts, and then you feel free to then apply those concepts on your websites however you'd like to. So what we're going to do is, to start off with, is we're going to actually be completing briefly looking at our Nav Bar. So currently my Nav Bar is looking pretty, well, it's not looking the best. It's all looking a little bit, you know, it's not looking particularly nice. And there's, no, it's not the best. It's not the best. So I'm going to be making a couple of, this isn't necessarily going to change the layout, but it's a feature that you can add to add a little bit of responsiveness to your website. So there's a lot of different, how can I put this? There's lots of different ideas behind a responsive web design. Okay, so things like, you know, how your website can change based on if you're on a phone or a tablet or a PC, which is something that we'll be looking at next week. Using media queries to how we can scale things down based on the window size and that sort of thing. But what we've got here is a way in which we're able to add some responsiveness to the website, so that when we do something, the website essentially responds to what we're doing. So we're going to be using a little bit of CSS to do that today. So if you bear with me 1 second, just so I can get this set up. Okay, so the thing that I'm going to do to start off with is I'm actually going to introduce what's known as a hover element. Okay, so can anybody tell me what a hover element does? I'm sure a lot of you might figure it out from the name. Anybody know what a hover does? Again, don't worry if you don't. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, absolutely. So it's how, when you hover over something, the website will respond to you making, to you doing that, essentially, and it will make a change to that specific thing. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to be applying that style, that change, to my Nav Bar. Okay, so a lot of you might remember, if I navigate back to Visit Wales, you can see that if we're looking at the Visit Wales website, when I hover over one of the Nav Bar icons, you can see that it actually changes the font color to being red. So that's what we're going to do on our websites now. We're going to style our navbar to do something similar. So to do that, I've navigated to the part of my CSS page where I actually refer to my anchors. Okay, so this is, so of course the anchors being the links to the other parts of the page. Of course they're just blank links at the moment, but it's the links to the other part of the page. And what I want to have happen is I want the anchor itself, not the list item, the anchor itself to change color when I hover over the icon. Okay, so what we'll do is we will apply that style now. So again, I've gone to the part of my CSS document which contains where my anchors are, so that I'm keeping that structure. And I'm going to use a snippet of code which is a colon, okay, so 2 dots, and then hover, and then we're going to open the brackets. Okay, and what this is going to do, as the name suggests, is now we can tell our website what we would like the elements to do when we hover over them. So if I say color, let's say green, okay, let that render, you'll see now that when I hover over my icons in my nav bar, they actually change color into being green. Okay, so you can do all sorts of things with this. Okay, you're not just restricted by color. You could say, I don't know, let's just say text decoration A. What does it mean? It means anchor. So it's in a way you could think of it like a hyperlink in a way. So it's a link to either another website, a different part of your page, that sort of thing. Okay. So we could say something like text decoration underline, so that now when I hover over my icons, as well as highlighting them in green, it also underlines them. Okay. You could even do something really funky, where you could say something like font size, I don't know, I'm not sure what the current size is actually, but let's just go wild and say 40 pt. So now when I hover over them, looks terrible, but you can see that it actually increases the font size when I hover over the icon. Okay, so I'm going to pull that part out actually because it looks terrible. But these are different styles that you can apply with hover. Whilst we're on the topic of sort of a bit of responsiveness, there's another thing that we can do, which is called active. So does anybody know what active means? If I was to say a active, oops, does anybody know what that means? No? No, it's okay. Don't worry. That's okay. Don't worry, it's fine. Well, active means after you've clicked on something, a lot of you might notice that it changes colour. So at the moment these links are all blue by default, okay? But if I click on it, you'll notice that they now change to being purple once I have clicked on one of them. So it means that you've already visited that specific link, okay, or in this instance this group of links, but you've already visited that link. So what you can actually do using a:active is you can restyle those links to being a different colour after you visited them. So it might be that you want them to be, for an example, you might change them to wanting to be grey, so that it's a little bit more obvious. Not quite sure why that's not rendered properly, but essentially once you've visited a link, I think it's because I've already clicked on them. As you can see, when I click on it now, it is going grey. It's just it's not staying grey because it had already changed into purple. But you can see that after I've clicked on a link, it changes itself to being grey as a reminder that you've already visited that website. So these are different things that you can apply once you are clicking on the link. So after you are active, as you are clicking the link, it will change it to being a different colour. Okay, you are actively clicking on it. So that is the active and the hover elements. So I'll just give everybody a couple of minutes just to apply that, just 2 minutes, just in case people want to have a go at styling their nav bar, or doesn't have to just be the nav bar, it can be other links on the page as well. Just give you all a chance to style that so that you're able to make some changes, and then we'll carry on in a second. Okay, I'll just give everyone about 2 minutes to do that. Does anybody have any questions so far, or is everybody okay so far? That's okay. Before the hover, we haven't done anything other than the hover so far. That's all we've applied so far. Okay? Don't worry. Does anybody else have any other questions so far? That's good. Martin, you weren't here last week. Okay. Do you want me to? Do you want to? Well, you can either. Were you here for the first week, Martin, when we started adding stuff onto HTML and that, or was it just last week that you missed? Missed the first one and last week. Okay, that's fine, don't worry. So if you like, do you want me to I can send you a template of my website. It's not not very good, so you know you can make some changes. You can make some changes. Yeah, that's right. Well done for remembering that. That's the link to set up your style sheet as well. That's pretty good. Well done. But Martin, if you haven't got much in the way of HTML and that as well, I'm happy to share my template with you, and then you can make it much better, if that would help. Yeah, go for it. That's okay, no worries. If there's anything that you want help with catching up wise, or anything you're not sure about, just pop it in the chat, and I'll explain it. Okay. No, we didn't. So currently the links to other pages of the website are still blank. That we've not populated those with links yet. Um, if you want to do that, the only thing you'd need to do is change in your nav bar. All you would need to do is change the hash symbol here, the hashtag, to being, if you're working on separate, so if you're working on it locally, you would need to include the sort of like the file path or the name of the file, or the name of the specific page that that your other pages are called. So you might have one that's called, it might be called something like, I don't know, contents or contact us or something like that. You would change the hash symbol to being that. And if you're working on CodePen, all you would need to do really is just pop in, I guess, the URL of the pen. So how are you working on it, Martin? Are you working CodePen or are you working on it sort of locally? CodePen. So my understanding is what you can do if you want to. Again, I'm not sure if Joe knows anything more about CodePen than I do. If you're not working on like a CodePen project, what you can do is start a new pen. You could simply copy and paste the first part of your HTML over into the new pen, and then you would just change the hash symbol there to being the URL of that pen. So you can you would just simply take the URL of this specific pen, and then you would pop it into where that hash symbol is. Okay, cool. So we'll carry on working through things. If anybody does have any questions as we're going through, just let me know. I am monitoring. I can see the chat constantly, so if anybody does want to ask anything, feel free. So what we're going to add now are just a couple of HTML features that we haven't talked about yet. Very little there's not many features really, it's just one or two. But what we're going to be looking at are things called an aside and a div. Okay, so it's a bit of a funny name, but they have their uses. Okay, so we'll go through an aside to begin with. Okay, so I'm going to place my aside in this section here where I've got a comment saying that was where I was meant to be putting information about Carnarvon Castle. Okay, so I'm going to pop my aside in here, and it's spelt aside. Okay, and the purpose of an aside is it allows you to place content to the side of the page, okay, as the name suggests. So in a sense you can kind of imagine, so see this section that we have here, okay, bar for this new head. Let's just talk about this section here. Okay, currently that's just part of its own section, and it's part of a paragraph. Okay, but let's just say that we wanted this entire section to just being on the side of the screen. So again, I'm not quite sure. In terms of Visit Wales, I'm not sure if they have an example of this, but we can take a quick look as we scroll through. Okay, they don't seem to have an example of an aside, but essentially the purpose of it is you might want a section that just goes down one part of the screen. So it might be that you want, let's have a look on one of their other pages to see if there's an example. Okay, so it's not the best example in the world, but we could use it as an example. So we have this section here. Okay, this, in a way, you could think about it as it's like its own section. Okay, and what's happening is it's pushed to the side of the page. Okay, so it's on the side of the page. And the idea is that that's got its own section and it's on the side. Now, the idea behind it is that it's a tag that you can use to remind yourself that that section is to be kept to the side of the screen, okay, to the side of your page. It doesn't necessarily, you could do this with a section, you could do this with an article. You don't have to put it in an aside in order to format it to be to the side of your page, okay? However, it is recommended that instead of putting something just in a section and then formatting it to be on the side, that you actually put it into an aside so that it can help you to remind you that that is part of the website that needs to be on the side. So I might decide to put something like a paragraph as part of my aside. So we'll just say this is going to be my aside, okay, and then I'll close my p tag and close the aside as well. So remember, we're using the slash and then the word and then the element, exactly the same element as the opening element, but with a slash in front of it. So this is my aside. Now you'll see that in the actual website it has gone to the side, okay, as the name as it's meant to, but that's not been formatted just because of the aside tag to go to the side. It's just done that because that is how HTML works. It structures things to being one on top of the other. But you can reposition specific parts of your website to being just on the side by using CSS. So what we can do is we can actually use something known as a float. Okay. So the float command, or the float code, is used to, essentially you could think of it as floating parts of your website or sliding parts of your website to being on different bits of the page. So for an example, I'll just select the aside and I might say something like float and then I'll say right for an example, okay? And what you can see is that my aside, ignore the fact that it has gone beneath this li down here. That's because the margins have collapsed, which is something that we can talk about later. But you can see that it's now floated this specific aside to the side of my screen. Okay, you can apply floats to other things as well. So it might be that I want to float my, I don't know, let's just say we float the main menu, or maybe not the main menu. Let's float this UL to the right as well. So we'll give it a class, which is again something that we'll look at in a minute. And I'll give it a class of, say, let's just say list. If I float that list over to the right, you can see that the list is now over there. But again, the margins and stuff have collapsed, but we can talk about that later. But it's floated that list over to the right hand side of the screen. Okay, so those are floats. It's just, again, it's one of those features that you can use if you want to have a bit of freedom with restructuring your website. Okay. So that's how you would do that. Does anybody have any questions about that so far? Okay. Yeah, so we'll go through classes next. That's the next thing we're going to talk about, okay? That's okay. Yeah, don't worry. We'll talk about classes in a second, okay? So we're just going to go through divs first. What's your aside section's not appearing? Okay. So how does it look? Ah, okay. Try that. Okay. Does it look something similar to how I've got on my screen? Okay, so you can put the aside. Technically, you could actually put the aside on its own. So if you pull it out of a section, you could just have it as kind of like a standalone thing. So you could put aside just on its own like that if you want to. It doesn't have to be as, you know, part of a section. You could do something like that. You can see that it is still there, down there. Have you had any luck with it? Has it worked? Not yet. Okay. Okay. I'm not sure. Double check the. So have you put a? Have you put? I take it you've put like a. What have you put? Like a p tag inside of the aside or something like that. A paragraph inside, and still not coming up. Okay. Do you want to? Can you take a screenshot or a print screen of your code and put it in the chat? And I'll have a look. Yeah, take a screenshot, put it in the chat, and I'll have a look to see why that's not working. Yeah, that's okay. Don't worry. Let's have a look. Oh, I can see. I think I can see where your problem is. You need. Can you see where you've put your aside? Yeah, have you spotted it? Yeah, good. There you go. There we are. Okay. So, does it work? It's appeared as part of your list. Okay, so the reason that it's done that is because you need to put a closing list tag. So do you see you've got UL, then you've got a list item and a list item. Underneath that second list item, you need to put a closing UL tag. And then that'll hopefully fix it then. Let's have a look. Let's see. Oh yeah, that's looking good. It's coming together really nicely. Yeah, so your aside, it will kind of act like a normal paragraph until you apply that float. So did you apply the float to your CSS? Oh yeah, you did put aside float. Oh, it's because you're floating it to the left. So what it's done there is it has just kept it floated to the left of the screen. So if you were to change that to say float right, you should see that it'll shoot across to the other side of the screen. Okay. Yeah, cool. Okay. Yeah, you don't have to include it if you don't want to. It was just something that you could do if you felt like you wanted to throw in a bit of more styling, kind of, if you wanted a bit of flexibility with your styling or something like that. So I'm actually going to just temporarily remove my second list from my footer because it's getting in the way a bit. There we go. Okay, so I just want to briefly talk, before we talk about classes, I just wanted to mention the use of a div. So, a bit of a funny name, I know. I'm not going to include any on my actual website, but I will just show you what I mean by a div. So a div would be written like, let me put one here. So this would be separate to a section, okay? It's its own section, and it's spelt div, okay? And then you would also need a closing div tag as well, okay? Div, okay? So the idea of a div is that it's essentially just a box, okay? So it's kind of like, so you know how you have a section? That's a section, yeah? You've got an article, which is an article. You've got an aside, which is an aside. A div is basically like a nothing. It's just a box, okay? So you can put anything in a div. You could put a picture in a div, you could put a paragraph in a div, you could put a list in a div, you can put whatever you want in a div. Before, the idea, so the reason that we've got things like section, aside, article and that sort of thing is because it helps you to keep track of what bit of your website is doing what. So before they came around, what you had was just loads and loads of divs. And it wasn't very helpful because you weren't able to really remember what each thing was doing. Whereas now, if you want to add it in a section, you can actually call it a section. Yeah, so it used to just be loads and loads of divs, whereas now you can have actual sections that split up the content. Okay? So that's the idea behind a div. Again, these aren't things you have to include. They're just there. Okay, they're just things that are there. Okay, just something that you needed to know about, really. So, classes. Before we move on to classes, does anyone have any questions about asides or divs before we move on to talking about classes? No? That's okay? Okay. So, classes. I know there's quite a lot of theory in this lesson, in this coding club today, so do let... I wondered what that was then for a second. So, we're going to talk about classes, which I can see that some people are doing the it's text to, yeah, it's the text to speak software. I can see that it's being used. Probably best if we keep that to a minimum during the live stream, if that's okay. So, as I was saying, classes, they're not... classes are very, very useful when we're using... It's okay, don't worry. Don't worry. So, classes are used within our HTML document so that we're able to choose specific elements to edit in our CSS. So, when we are... currently, what we're doing is we are selecting the whole element. So we're choosing all of the HTML, we're choosing all of the H1s, we're choosing every single nav UL and nav LI in the entire HTML document. But it might be that we want to only choose specific H2s or specific H1s and that sort of thing. And to do that, we can actually assign those elements classes. Okay? So let's just say, for example, that I want to style this specific H2 element. So I don't want to style all of the, I think I've only got I've only got one H2 anyway. But let's just say I had multiple H2s throughout this document and I only want to style one of those H2s. Instead of having to say in my CSS H2 text align center, let's say font color green. Okay, let's just say that I only want to include I only want to do that with one of my H2s. I don't think I've got any. I've got one H2 so far, but let's just say I wanted to do that with all of my, just one of my H2s and not all of them. Okay, we can actually assign a class to that H2. So let's make some changes. So instead of having my H2 just being called a H2, I'm going to give it a class which I'm going to call I don't know, let's just say title. Okay, so I've written class is equal to title. By doing that, what I can do is, instead of me having to write H2 in here and changing all of the H2s throughout the document, I can actually select just that specific H2 to edit. Okay, so let's just say I put I want to change that specific title. So what you do is you would write dot title. So if you're selecting a class, you don't just put title in this case, you would put dot title. So you always have to put dot followed by the name of the class. And then after that, you can just style it in its own way. So I could say text align center. See, that's gone back to the center now. I might say color green. Change it to green. Okay, so instead of me just selecting this specific all of the H2s throughout the entire document, I'm now only editing that one H2, and we can do the same thing with anything within our HTML. So let's just say now, if we have a look, I've got a I've got another H2 down here. So down here I have another H2. This is a new heading. Okay, and you can see that that H2 has not changed because I have not selected it to being I've not selected every single H2 in the document. I've just selected the one that I've given a class of title. So the idea of a class is that you are giving a specific name to a specific element, and then you're using that to choose that specific element within the CSS script. Okay. So I hope that makes sense. I know it's quite confusing, but does that make sense to everybody, or does anybody want me to go over it again? So it's essentially just a class. It's a name, or like you can picture it like a name tag. Okay, it's like a name tag for a specific element, and we are using that specific element's name tag to individually style it within our CSS document. So like we've got here, I've given this H2 a class of title, and then I am styling that individual document within the CSS file, and it is making it look as I have told it to. Okay, so that's the idea of classes. I know it's slightly convoluted and a little bit weird, but that's the idea. It's so that you're not having to style everything all at once. You're just styling things individually. Okay. So I hope that makes sense. I think this would be a good opportunity for us to have a bit of a, I don't want to say a break, but a chance for us to style our websites a little bit by applying those new features. So asides, divs, classes. So I'll give everybody 5 minutes to apply a few classes to their CSS files, to their HTML files, and style those in CSS. So that way we can make a couple of styling changes to our website, and I'll make some styling changes to my hideous website as well. But if anybody has any questions, let me know. But otherwise, just you feel free to carry on with your website designs. Yeah, so that's this section. That's this section here. So it's exactly the same. The only thing you need to do is when you're naming the class, you put a full stop in front of it, and then the name of the class. Okay. So I might change this list. Yeah, let's change this list to having a class of list 2. Yeah, of course. So today, what have we got for the rest of today? Let me take a look. So we're just going to be looking at rearranging things, which we've sort of already done, but you can rearrange things through CSS, looking at backgrounds and background types and things like that, and different ways that we can do that. And then if we've got time at the end, we'll also look at some Google fonts and list style types as well. That okay? Yeah? Cool. No, that's okay. Like I said, there's a lot of theory in this session, because there's a lot of things like that you need to change. But I tell you what, how about we skip some of the other stuff and we look at something a bit more interesting, like Google Fonts. Okay. That's okay. I mean, if you need to go and do your homework and things like that, then you know that this session is recorded, remember, so it will be on YouTube for you to watch. That's fine. Finish it off. Yeah, no, that's okay. Yeah, that's fine. No problem. Well, thank you for joining in up to now anyway. So we'll speak to you next week. Bye. Bye. Okay. So hopefully everybody's had a bit of a chance now to make some changes to their website. I apologise again. I know this is quite a lot of new stuff to learn, so there's a lot of theory. But if I am going a bit too fast or too slow or something like that, then just tell me, okay? I know this isn't the most interesting of session, but it's little bits that you kind of need to know if you want to kind of style your websites a bit a bit differently. Okay, so on that basis, we'll have a quick look now at just a few things on content alignment, so to speak. Okay, so just the ways that we can move things around on our websites so that they can look a little bit so that we can position them in different places. Okay, remember, whilst I'm talking, you don't necessarily have to follow along if you don't want to. You're free to go off and style your website as you please. I'm just adding things to the website as we go, and then you can wind the recording back or ask questions on certain points as we're working our way through it. Okay, so I'm actually just going to quickly populate my footer just so that I remember that there's something in there. There we go. Okay. Yeah, super. Okay. So, content alignment. Okay, there's different ways that we can do things in order to reposition some stuff. So we've already looked at a few of those things. So we've obviously got things like text align, which we have set to center. We've done other things as well, such as doing that, like I said, the idea of an aside and using floats to position things around the website. Okay. The one thing that I will quickly talk about now is this idea of margins, borders, and padding. Okay. So margins, borders, and padding, and how we can use those in order to help us shrink things down so that we can float things around on our websites a little bit. So, as we know, margins, borders, and padding are quite useful to us, okay, because every single element will contain some form of margins, borders, or padding. So if I open up the Elements Inspector now, we can see that I'm currently on the image. Okay, so we can see that I'm on the image here, and this image has got this this kind of layout. Okay, so the image contains margins, borders, and padding. So you can see that when I highlight over the element itself, it makes the image turn blue, and that image will be surrounded by margins, borders, and padding, which aren't always visible. Okay, but we can still adjust the size of them using margins, borders, and padding, or by using different heights and widths. So if I make a quick change to my image to start off with, okay, so let's just say I go to underneath my nav UL, underneath the anchors, underneath the title, I'm going to say something like dot, I'm going to give my image a class to start off with. So let's give my image a class of we'll call it image1. So if I go here and I say dot image1, I can readjust the height and width of my image to being a lot smaller. So let's say 150 pixels, and we'll make the width 150 pixels. So it has squashed. It looks terrible because it's really, really small and a bit squashed. But you can see that it has now made it shrunk it down so that things actually look a little bit better on the page. But let me adjust the width a little bit so that it kind of looks a bit clearer. So let's say 300 pixels. There we go. So you can see now that I've shrunk down the size of my image to a much clearer size so that it actually looks a bit better. And everything can now be more easily positioned around this image, because currently before that image was absolutely gigantic and it was taking up way too much space. So by shrinking it down, we have now got a much smaller image, and it's easier to reposition things on the screen. Now, another thing that we can do is we can actually adjust how large a specific section is in terms of how much it takes up of the screen. So by default, elements take up 100% the width of the screen, so they go from the left hand side of your screen right the way through to the right hand side of your screen. Okay, but you can change this so that instead of taking up the full width of the screen, it actually only takes up part of your screen. So I'm going to give this section a class, and I'm going to say, I'm going to call it, say, first section, and I'm naming it using camel case. So remember, camel case is where you would put an uppercase S for, or an uppercase letter for the second word, and you wouldn't put any spaces. So I'm going to say section class first section. So I'm going to say here dot first, not there, there, section, and then I might specify that the width of this section is going to be 70% of the screen, and you can see that that's done that. And then I might make my aside something like width 30% of the screen. So it's actually repositioned where things are on the screen in terms of width. Okay. So you can see that I'm using this concept of pixels again instead of using any other unit of measurement, but I'm using the concept of pixels, which is, again, in relation to your screen size and things like that, how large something appears on your screen. You want to add some borders to the aside? Yeah, that's okay. So I will show you how to do that, please. So let's just say you wanted to add some borders. We could do something like, what could we do? Let me have a think. So we could do something like this, border style. If you have a Google, there are lots of different border styles to choose from, but I'll just go with the most default one, which is solid. And then I could say border style solid, and then I could say something like, so you can see now that that's applied a border around it. And then the reason that it's slightly larger than the actual text is because if we inspect the element, currently when it shrinks, you can see that it actually fits quite neatly, but it's because the actual aside is still taking up quite a large chunk of the screen. But you can then, basically, you would just say border style, whatever style you want to choose, and then you can then apply different colours or different bits and pieces to that border. That would probably be the best way to do it. Really like the way your website's coming across now, though. It looks really good. So you could adjust, could say border, let's say, see if this makes a difference. Oh yeah, it's got rid of it altogether. Just ignore that. So you can apply a border style, which is solid, or there's also groove, I think is another example. Oops, if I could spell it. Which is slightly different again. And then that, they're basically different styles. But yeah, just go to your aside section in your CSS and then just apply a border style. That would be the best way of doing it. I hope that helps. can't quite remember the reason why it's taking up all of that additional space and it's not fitting snugly around the element. I need to remind myself on that. I'm not sure why, I can't remember why it's doing that. I'm not sure if Joe can remind me on why it's doing that, or if anybody actually can remind me why it's doing that. I can't quite remember. The size of my border around my aside, it breaches the size of the actual, it doesn't like fit snugly around the text. That's because it's taking up, yeah, and inspect it. That's the size of the aside, yeah. So, okay, there we go. So that's the reason why it's doing that. Thank you, Joe. Okay. So next thing that we're going to look at, is everybody okay so far? Like I said, I do apologise for like all of the theory stuff that we're looking at today. I know it's quite dense, some of this stuff. So you know, I apologise that it's, you know, so it's that it's quite dense and it's a lot of new information. But unfortunately, that is there's a lot of stuff to learn with CSS, and this doesn't really even you know, there's a lot more than there's a lot of stuff that you can learn, and there are lots of websites out there that you can use if you wanted to sort of read around the subject a little bit more as well. So I've briefly touched on backgrounds in the past as well. So we've looked at backgrounds in the past and background types and background styles, and there are lots of different ways that we are able to alter the way that our backgrounds look on our websites. Okay. Now the other week I remember, of course, I've mentioned this idea of just applying a background color to the entire HTML document, and that's what I'm doing there. I've simply got a HTML document, HTML section in my CSS document, and I've assigned it a background color, and that background color has then taken up the entire HTML document. But there are lots of different ways in which you can actually alter the way that your background looks. Okay, so I'm going to demonstrate a quick example of something that I worked on. Again, this is another one of my terrible websites, so I do apologise, but I'll demonstrate an example of another website that I worked on the other day. So I've applied a bit of JavaScript to this, so this is something that we'll be looking at in the next few weeks. Hopefully you can all see this horrible website that I've produced. It's a little bit better than the other one probably, but what I've done is I've included the TechnoCamp's logo as a background, but I've tiled it. Okay, so I've used some CSS. Whoops! I've used some CSS to actually make it look like a tile effect. Okay, and you can have it going across. I could also repeat that bit of code, so I could actually say something like background repeat, and then say if I remove the -x even, that will then fill up the entire website with just the TechnoCamp's logo. So there are different sort of CSS styles. I won't apply it to the other website, but I'll leave this code on the screen for you to use if you want to. But what I've done is I've applied a URL, so where I've got my background image section, I've applied a URL to a specific image, and then I've specified how I would like that image to look. So I've just said repeat, and that will then duplicate it across the entire website. Okay, so it doesn't look the best, but there are obviously different ways that you can style your websites. You could, like I say, apply an image as a background. You could apply you could just have, you know, a color. You could just have it white. You could do just like a plain background, like Visit Wales have done. Okay, it's just a plain white background, that sort of thing. Lots and lots of different things that you can do with that. There's one small thing that I want to briefly mention before I give you some time to actually go about styling your website, and that's the idea of list style types. And all I mean by this is that you can change the way that your lists look. Okay, so if I go down to the example that I have for my list, let me find the correct list. Let me find the right list. There we go. So I've styled all of my ULs to containing a list style type of square. And if you have a look at the list here, this list has now got square bullet points. And if you do some Googling for CSS list style types, you'll be able to find a series of different examples of list style types. So if you have got a list and you want to change the way that it looks, you can apply your list style types to that and make them look slightly different. Okay, so different, that's just one example of some different things that you can do there. Okay, so anyone have any questions? The repeat code with the pattern, I will show that for you first. So if you want to repeat say a background image or something like that, you would use this bit of code here. Hopefully you can see that. But obviously, change the URL, or if you are editing it locally, you can simply just put an image file path in there using like I guess you'd use a href or something like that, and then it would link to that specific image within the correct directory. But to repeat it, you would just say background dash repeat, and then X of course means it would go across like this website's doing. Y would make it go vertical, or if you just want it to repeat consistently, you would just say repeat, and it will repeat both X and Y. Okay. So this specific website that I've got here, again, apologies for the layout, but this website contains some basic media queries, which is something that we're going to be looking at next week. And I've also contained some JavaScript in this website as well. So these are, to give you a bit of a sneak preview of the JavaScript that we're going to be looking at. This is some of the JavaScript. I know it looks slightly daunting, but it's actually not too bad. Okay, even I can understand it, so it's not too bad. But what we're going to be doing is programming some basic JavaScript. So you can see, I'm not sure if any of you noticed when I clicked over onto this website earlier, but it prompted me to enter my name when I launched the page, and that will change the name in the heading. Okay, when I navigate onto the website. I've also got an example here of when I click on a link, it asks me, do I want to follow that specific link to go to a specific page? Okay. Again, these are blank hyperlinks still, like on the other page, but the concept still applies. And they are, some of you who use Discord quite frequently might have come across the idea of an alert. So when someone shares a link in one of the channels, often Discord will say, are you sure you want to follow this link to this specific website? And what that does, this follows a similar concept of it's a prompt, or what's called an alert, where it will say, are you sure you want to do this? Yes or no. And then it will follow through if you say yes. And then I've put another small bit of code here, not sure if any of you can see that, where when you push your button, it actually spells out, let me refresh so that it will do it again. But when you hit a button, it actually writes out a paragraph using like a weird typewriter style structure. Okay, so I know this website is in terms of layout slightly messy, but there's some JavaScript stuff in there which we'll be looking at in the next couple of weeks, which you can apply to your websites very soon. Okay, so anyone have any questions about what we've covered so far, or is everybody doing okay? Once again, I apologise for all of the theory and things like that. I know there's a lot to learn, but I can see that you're all getting along really well with it, so which is good. We'll take around we'll say around 10 minutes here to spend some time tinkering with our websites, applying things to the websites and things like that. And then if we've got some time at the end before we wrap up, we'll have a quick look at some Google fonts. Okay, and what, obviously, for those of you who don't know what a Google font is, it's essentially a library, okay, of online fonts which you can link to. So I've actually used one in this website. Okay, so I've actually got one here, and essentially you can link to a specific website. So I've used Google Fonts in this case, and then this will access a full library of fonts that you can use. So we might as well go through it now, actually, while we're here. So when you for any of you who want to do this, I can leave this code on the screen for you, and I can post a link to the Google Fonts page in the chat for you in a second. But within the head tags of your HTML, you can apply links to different things. So a lot of you might have already linked to your style sheets. Eventually we'll be linking to our JavaScript scripts, okay? And we do this using link tags, and you can apply a URL to a href, and by doing that it opens up a whole bunch of different fonts that you can apply to your websites, okay? And so that you can style them and change things to look slightly different, okay? So in this example, I am using a Google font, and by doing that, you know, I've not selected the most interesting of fonts. I've just gone with Arial, which is probably one that's already, it could well be already built into the browser anyway. But the list of fonts that you can use is quite large from the Google Fonts library, and you can apply those fonts using this bit of code, and then telling you can then tell your no, apologies, I've just realized I've got it there twice. That is a mistake. Fix that. There we go. So sorry about that. This is the bit of code that you need to look at. So the font family that we've got here, I've gone with Courier Prime. Now Courier Prime is a font that's available from that Google Fonts library. If that's not available, it will then go to monospace, and then I can of course also default it to then being sans serif if none of those fonts are available. But because I've linked to a Google font library, this specific font is available, and I can make use of it on my website. I will quickly post a link in the chat to that Google font, and I will leave this code on the screen for you in case you decide that you would like to use some Google fonts on your website. I will just quickly find the Google fonts that website that I used. Here we go. So if you went to Google Fonts, okay, and then if you click on a specific font, so I will demonstrate this to you as well on the screen. So if I go to Google Fonts, okay, so this is the website that I made use of, and you can see that there are tons and tons and tons of different fonts that I can use. Okay, there are loads of different fonts. So there's a massive list, and you can choose any of these fonts. So let's say I change mine. So I'm going to choose this one. Okay. When you select a font, it also then lets you choose different styles. So let's say I go for this specific style, which is regular 400. It then gives you a selection of what you want to do with it. So you can download it or you can embed it, and it's this embed section that you want to be looking at. Okay. Now you can simply copy the link tag, pop it into the head of your document. So I'll change my font, so I'm going to pop this into the head of my document. Okay. And then I'm going to change the CSS rules. So I'll change the font family here. So I'll copy and paste those CSS rules. And you can see that my font has now changed to being Josephine Sans, and then after that it will default to then being sans serif if that font library isn't available. Okay. But Google fonts are, you know, they're kind of like an interesting way of being able to change the fonts that are on your website to looking slightly different, and it takes you away from having to use the default sans serif or, you know, just the default fonts. You can use lots of different ones. So take that link from your Google Fonts page, stick the link tag inside of the head, and then take the CSS rules and apply that to your CSS document in the HTML section, so that it applies to if you want it to apply to the entire website, or you can just apply it to a specific thing if you only want it to apply to one part of the website. So you might just want your H1 to be in that font. You can do that as well if you want to. Okay. That is everything that I wanted to cover for today. Does anyone have any questions that they want to ask at this point? No? Okay, that's fine. So, well, if anybody does think of anything, remember to just post it in chat and I'll do my best to answer. What I would like you to spend the rest of the session doing now, so the last just under 20 minutes, is I'd like you to now spend some time continuing to work on those websites. Okay, so this period of the call now of the club now will kind of be like a Q&A session. So if you do have any questions that you want to ask, feel free to do that. Okay. However, what I would like you all to do now is just spend a little bit of time applying what we've learned today to your websites. looking at the structure of your websites, adding to them, changing the styles, applying different concepts, etc., and just working your way through that. Okay, and then if you do have any questions, just pop them in the chat. And then I'll just be here working on my website as well. So that will be the next. That'll be what we'll be doing for the rest of the session today. So yeah, that's what we'll do. So feel free to ask any questions as we're going along. And I'll be making some adaptations to my website. Has everybody had a good week so far? Okay, so what can we do? I think the main thing I'm going to start changing is my main menu because it's looking not looking the best currently. In fact, let's get rid of all of that. So remember, if you wanted to adjust the spacing between each one of your menu items, you could do that using padding. So you can see here that they're much more spaced out there now than what they were. And I've still got my active hover and active links on them. If you wanted to change this colour, so you can see now that I've clicked on one of the links, they've changed them all to being purple from the default font colour of blue. But one of the other responsive elements that you can add is actually a visited, and when you visited the link, instead of it changing it to the generic purple colour, you could say that when you visited the link, it goes red. So you can see that they've now changed to being red after you visited them. Okay. Okay. let's have a look at what's going on down here. Okay. Everybody getting on okay? Hopefully everybody's getting on okay with their changes. Feel free to send over some screenshots of the code that you've been, or of your actual website like Pierce did earlier, for us to have a look at how they, so we can have a look at how they're coming along. Much better than mine as usual, I suppose. I'd imagine. I've only zoomed out, by the way, just so that I can see the elements inspector slightly better, because it's a little bit big. Otherwise, a bit zoomed, bit too much, bit zoomed in, a bit too much. You'll also see if any of you are using the element inspector to help you alter the structure of your websites. Some of you might notice that as well as seeing your own code, you're also going to be looking at CodePen's own website's code as well, as part of the elements inspector, because everybody's it'll be the code for the whole page will be in here, and since your page is kind of like a subsection of the whole web page, you'll be able to see CodePen's own code as part of that as well. Okay, so since we're coming up to the last few minutes of the session now, I'll just kind of outline what's happening next week and just give a bit of a recap on what I mentioned at the start. So as next week, we're going to be carrying on with HTML, okay? So doing a bit more HTML and CSS, a bit more web design. Next week we're going to be looking at media queries specifically. So again, I'm afraid there is still a bit of theory to go, but it's all useful stuff, I promise. So we'll be having a look at this idea of mobile first design, media queries, and how we can apply those to our CSS documents. And then we'll also be starting the session off with a little bit of an introduction to JavaScript. Okay, so it's mainly going to be a recap on what we did way back in week 1, where we did JavaScript in Minecraft. Okay, so it's going to be a bit of a recap on that, and ultimately that will then be the I believe is that we've got, from I remember from my planning, we've got a session next week to finish off CSS and start JavaScript. Then we've got a whole session on JavaScript, and then the last session on HTML and CSS will be the week after that, which will be us finishing off JavaScript, and then hopefully having an opportunity to share our websites with each other. So that will be the plan for what we'll be doing that'll be our last session, which will be in 3 weeks' time. And then just to give a brief recap on what I mentioned at the start of the stream about the changes that are coming to TechnoClubs. So as we know, as I mentioned, TechnoClubs are going to be shifting days and different groups, and we will prepare a document for you based on when the final changes are put together. We'll put an announcement in the Discord for you, and also how they're going to work as well, because we're working on a different way of presenting things. So once the details have been finalised, we will let you know. But what we'll be doing is we'll be posting an announcement when the details are finalised. But what's going to happen is we're going to still be running TechnoClubs, and they will be run by me, Jack, and also from Cardiff University as well. So you can choose which one of those sessions you would like to go to, or something like that. And then we will also be doing, once a week as well, we will also do Techno Live, which is going to be an hour-long live stream on one-off topics each week. So Techno Clubs are going to be basically a similar concept to what we've been doing now, which is sort of 6 weekly sessions looking at different things like web design, like we've just done, different concepts like that. And then we will also have the Techno Live sessions, which are going to be on different topics every week, and they'll be for an hour. But Techno Clubs are going to stay as 2 hours. Okay, so does anybody want to ask anything about that, about HTML, CSS, or about anything that we've discussed today so far before we wrap up? No? Okay, no problem. So in that case, thank you all very, very much for joining in today. I hope you all learned something new, and I hope that you've all managed to add a few details to your websites. We'll be back again next week, same time, 4 till 6. The new coding clubs will not be starting, the new sort of structure. They're not going to start until November. Okay, so we're still going to be running as normal until November. So me and Jack will still be doing our usual sessions at the usual times, okay, until the start of November. So still the same old system for now, and I'll be back next Wednesday between 4 and 6 to host the next session on web design. Okay, so again, thank you very much, everybody. I'll stop the live stream now, and then Joe, I will speak to you in Techno Team.